Now, in this lesson, we continue with our discussion of exponents, specifically the part known as surds. Now, surds is another way of saying irrational numbers. Irrational numbers are these numbers that do not have perfect squares, do not have perfect cubes, Numbers like square root of 3, square root of 5, those numbers that cannot have a specific value when we want to find their square root or their cube root or their fourth roots. Those numbers are known as irrational numbers. They are also known as surds. That is where our discussion of today is. So I'm going to be sharing with you a screen right away where we will be having these numbers and we will look at how we will handle them mathematically. So right before you is what we call surds. This number is square root of 2, square root of 3, square root of 5, square root of 6, they keep increasing like that. They are known as surds. They are irrational numbers. Why are we interested in them? It's because sometimes we are required to simplify them. Sometimes we are required to add two surds, two irrational numbers. Sometimes we are required to subtract irrational numbers. Sometimes we are required to divide irrational numbers. Sometimes we are required to multiply irrational numbers. Let's start with simplifying. Suppose that we are simplifying the questions in exercise A. Square root of 12, square root of 125, square root of 48. What does it mean to simplify? Well, to simplify technically means to make it simple or to reduce it. That's now a mathematical term, to reduce it so that it's easy to understand or it's easy to handle. So to simplify the square root of 12, it means we have to express 12 it means we have to write 12 as a product of numbers that are much simpler than 12. In other words, the square root of 12 as question 1, the square root of 12 can be written as the square root of, well, we can write the square root of 12 as the square root of 2 times 6, because 2 times 6 is 12. We could also write it as 3 times 4, or 4 times 3. Now, the deal here is you have to look for two numbers. One of them must be a perfect square. For example, when we put 2 times 6, we get 12, which is what we had here initially. But the problem is none of these two is a perfect square, meaning none of these two numbers, 2 and 6, has got a square root. That means we have to do what? We have to change these numbers. We have to change them to 4 and to 3. They give us 12. 4 is a perfect square of 2. We can then go ahead to do what? To simplify. How do you simplify this? Well, we break this down then. We have to put there square root of what? Square root of 4 times square root of what? Times square root of 3. And this one can still be simplified too. Now notice that the square root of 4 is 2. And the square root of 3 is, well, we keep it like that. 3 does not have a square root. at least for now. That is the answer. If you are required to simplify, well, how about 125? Well, 125 can also be simplified. 125 can be simplified. Let's see how we can do it. So we are looking at the square root of 125. Now notice that 125 can be written as 5 times 25. So we can write this as, well, 5 times 25. 5 is not a perfect square, but 25 is. 25 is a perfect square of what? Of 5. And so we can break this down into what? We can break this down into the square root of 5. Can break this down into the square root of 5 and the square root of what? And the square root of 25. Well, we can then go ahead to simplify this. Now notice that since 5 is not a perfect square, we keep it the way it is. So we write square root of 5 the way it is initially. Then 25 is a perfect square of 5. In other words, the square root of 5 is, rather the square root of 25 is 5. And so we can then simplify this to what? We can simplify this to 5, which is this one, square root of 5. And that becomes what? That becomes our final answer. Well, how about if we are required to simplify the square root of 48? Well, let's see what we can get from here. Square root of 48. Now, let's check this. You know, there is a time when you really want to check it out and be sure. We want to find two numbers whose product is what? Two numbers whose product is 48. One of them must be a perfect square. So what are they? Well, we could think of 4. Or we could think of some other number. You know, maybe, well, let's try with 6. 6 seems not to be working. Well, let's write this. Let's write the square root of 48 as the square root of 4 times 12. 4 times, rather, first put it inside here, 4 times 12. And so we can then later break this into the square root of 4. Okay, then times the square root of what? The square root of 12. Yes, that could work like that. Or we could deal with the 16 also. You know, 16 could work. We could have square root of 3 times 16. That just came. Yeah, we could deal with the 16. 16 is much better. Well, I'm going to use 2 methods because most likely this is what you will also go through. What I'm trying to say is I'm going to find out the square root of 48 using 2 methods. The second method, I'm going to handle 3 and 16. Okay, it will be 3 and 16. But for the first one, let's first deal with it. So the square root of 4 is 2. that we have to multiply with the square root of 12, which we have got it to be 4 square root of 3. Rather, 2 square root of 3, it's up here, this value here, okay? That is the square root of 12. So we put it there. And we can then simplify this to what? 4 square root of 3. Like that. Well, that's done. That's how we simplify what? Square root of 48. We could also deal with this right away instead of going this way. If we decide to go this other way, then we will be having what? We'll be having square root of 3 separately. Okay, we're having square root of 3 separately, and we'll later have to multiply this with square root of what? Square root of 16 also separately. Like that. Okay, so what do we get from here? Well, what we get from here is going to be square root of 3. Okay, this is going to be square root of 3 times what? Times 4, because 4 is the square root of what? Of 16. So we can then simplify this to what? We can simplify this to 4 square root of 3. Yes, that's what we got. Now, the next thing we want to look at is, apart from simplifying it, what if we are required to multiply like we have in exercise B? Now you will have to handle question 4 and question 5 of exercise A. Then in exercise B, let's try to see how we can handle this. Well, the first two questions, we are having square root of 2, okay, radicals outside except here. So let's see, square root of 2 times, well, this is now going to be exercise what? Exercise B. Let's call it exercise B. This one up was exercise A. This one was exercise A. So for exercise B, what do we have? Let's copy the question right away. Snip it up. There we go. This is what we have. So this is the question we have to handle. The first question in exercise B. So what will this be equal to? Well, we will have to multiply the square root of 2 times 3, which is going to be 3 square root 2. Then later, we have to add what we get here to 2 square root of 2 times square root of 3. What we started with was the square root of 2 times 3, which is this. Then square root of 2 times square root of 5. That is going to give us square root of what? Square root of 10. We multiply the numbers inside the square root sign. That's what we get. Okay. So, well, is there a way we can simplify this? No, there is no way we can simplify that. We move on to the next question. What's the next question? The next question is question 2, which is asking us to do what? To multiply the square root of 6 times these two sums, the sum of these two radicals. Let's have it here. So now this one is going to be equal to what? Well, we say this is going to be equal to square root of 6 times square root of 2 is square root of 12. So we write this as square root of 12, okay? Then we add this to what? Square root of 6 times square root of 8. Well, Let's see. That's going to give us the square root of 6 times 8. What is 6 times 8? Well, with my calculator here, we have 6 times 8, giving us 48. Now, the good thing is we already have 48 here and 12 there. We can just substitute their values. So what will this be? Well, square root of 12 is 2, square root of 3. Just get that right way, and we put it here. We have to add this to what? Square root of 48, which is what? 4 square root of 3. Right here. See? All right, now after that, we simplify. Notice that the square root are the same, square root 3, square root 3. So we add the number before them, which is what? 4 plus 2, which gives us 6. So the final answer will be what? 6 square root of 3. 6 square root what? 3. That's the final answer. That is it. Now, the next question is question 3. For question 3, we don't have a number. Rather, we don't have a radical outside the bracket. Instead, we have a number. Let's see how we can handle this. So, question 3, how do we handle this? Well, we have to multiply 4 times square root of 5. There is a silent one in front of the square root of 5, which we use to multiply the 4 so that we still get 4. So we'll be having 4 square root what? Square root 5. Then now we have to add to what? 4 times 3, which is 12. And that's the final answer. There is no way we can simplify that further. Then the next question is asking us to do what? Well, the next question is asking us to simplify this. Let's see how we can simplify that right away. So question 4, we have a fairly complex type of what? Multiplication to deal with. So let's have it right down here. Now notice that these two will multiply all of this other quantity. So it will be like, well, 2, which has got to multiply what? Has got to multiply 2, rather 1 plus, okay, 1 plus square root 3. Like that. Then plus square root 3. Okay, this square root 3 is supposed to be used to multiply what? Supposed to be used to multiply all these other ones here. Right away. Yeah, there we go. So what we did here isn't much. Basically, multiplying 2 by everything in the second bracket, then later multiplying square root 3 by everything in the second bracket. When we do that, then we're on the right track. So now we notice that 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 1 square root 3 remains what? Remains 2 square root 3. So that's what we have, 2 square root 3. Then now we have also this one, square root 3 times 1, which is what? Which is 1 square root 3. You can just write it as square root 3 without that 1 in front, like that. Then now the next thing is square root 3 times square root 3 is square root of 9, which is what? Which is 3. Can we simplify this further? Yes. 1, this 3 plus 2 is 5. That we have to add to what? We have to, there is this 2 and there is this 1 here, which adds to 3 square root 3. So we have there 3 square root of 3. Yes, that is how we simplify question 4. Question 5 is for you. You can handle that. Okay, work on that question, question 5. Now, sometimes you are not simplifying, but you are required to solve. Let's solve for P and see what we can get. So for P, we have been given the square root of P minus 2. I would like to call this question 5, okay? So what do we have? We have the square root of p minus 2. Okay. Then there is also another quantity right outside the square root, that is minus 3 equals to 0. Yes, we have it that minus 3 equals to 0. So there we go. How do we handle this? Now notice that to handle this, the first step is to transfer 3 onto the right hand side. So when we transfer 3 onto the right hand side, the left hand side will be left with what? The square root of p minus 2. Then 3 will be on the right hand side. It will be positive since it was negative on the left hand side. Then in the next step, what we want to do is to square the quantity on the left hand side. Then later, we also square the quantity on the right hand side. That is how we move square root sign. Okay, so we are going to be squaring what we had before. And what is that? That is the square root of what? The square root of p minus 2. We are squaring this. What do we have on the right hand side? 3. We also have to square it. When we do that, we can now, it will help us to remove this radical sign, the square root sign. When we remove the square root sign, we are going to be having what? P minus 2 on the left hand side, and on the right hand side, we will be having 9. Now you see that this way, it's a lot easier to find the value of p. We just transfer negative 2 on the left from the left hand side to the right hand side, and we get 11. That is how we solve for p. Now, what if we are required to solve for t? Well, we have been given that t minus 1 equals to the square root of 7 minus t. So let me put it here. T minus 1 equals to the square root of what? 7 minus t. Like that. So yes, how do we then handle this? Well, the thing is we just have to remove the what? This square root sign. Now removing the square root sign requires us to square. So that then means the quantities on the left hand side will be squared. And that one on the right hand side will also be squared. So we have a square there. Then this one will be squared. So we put it inside the bracket. Then later we square it. Then also the terms on the left hand side inside the bracket. Then what? Then we square it. So that we have what? T minus 1. Yes. So here we will be done with the square root thing. We are only left with what? We are only left with t squared on the left hand side. That is t squared. That is after expanding, okay? T squared minus 2t plus 1. Then on the right hand side, what do we have? Well, on the right hand side, we have 7 minus t. Yes. So in the next step, we want to transfer the quantities on the what? On the right hand side to the left hand side. So what is this supposed to give us? Well, we will be having t squared minus 2t minus 1, this time minus 7, okay? Minus 7 plus t. Now equals to what? To 0. Now notice that from here, we will be having in the next step, well, in the next step, we'll be having t squared plus t, not 2t this time, rather minus t, because minus 2t plus t is minus t. Then here we'll be having what? We'll be having minus 6. minus 6 equals to 0. We can solve this. We can solve for t. Yes, we can solve for t. Two numbers that would give us a product of negative 6. We can use the method of products, rather the method of brackets. Two brackets will be adequate for us, equals to 0. So two numbers that would give us a product of negative 6, that is what? Negative 3 and positive 2. So we'll be having t minus 3 in one bracket and t plus 2 in another bracket. And in the next step, we just equate this one to 0, okay? This quantity here, we equate it to 0. So that we can conclude that t equals to what? To 3. Alternatively, we could also take the what? This second one. This is the second option now. We'll have to take this other one, t plus 2. We also equate it to 0. That one will give us a value of t. But t in this case will be negative 2. Okay, so t in this case equals to negative 2. That's how we solve for unknowns appearing in sides. Well, you will now have to handle the solution for f. Find the value of f in that. There is one more thing about sides, which I guess we should also look at. This thing is called rationalization. Rationalization means, making something rational. To rationalize is to make something rational. It's like to make something have a fraction. How do we rationalize this? Okay, how do we rationalize? How do we make this one here be rational, not irrational? Because sides mean irrational numbers. In rationalization, we want to make sides rational. We want to make it rational, not irrational. So how do we handle this? Well, just put it up here, question 1. So we want to rationalize. What do we want to rationalize? We want to rationalize 3 divided by what? Divided by the square root of 5. That is what we want to rationalize. And how do we do this? Well, to rationalize means we have to multiply it by 1. Or instead of multiplying it by 1, what we can do in the next step, we replace this 1 by the square root of 5. By the square root of 5, just have this. This is what we have now. We have to replace the 1. In the second step, we replace the 1 by the square root of 5. Then also here, the square root of 5. Notice that this one can still cancel and we'll still get the 1. We are not interested in canceling it. We are more interested in what comes out when we replace the 1 by the what? The denominator. So what we get here is 3 times the square root of 5. Then what we get here is the square root of 25, which is 5. And that's the answer, just that. And in the second question, we would like to rationalize. How do we rationalize it? Well, we want to rationalize 4 divided by square root of 8. 4 divided by the square root of 8. How do you rationalize that? Well, we rationalize it by multiplying it by 1. But now, in the step which follows, we want to replace the 1 this one here, we want to replace it with a number or a fraction which will reduce to 1, which in this case is what? Square root of 8. So we want to, instead of writing 1 there, we have square root of 8, and here square root of what? Square root of 8. What do we have for this? This one will give us, well, for the numerator, that will be 4 times square root of 8. Then for the denominator, that will be the square root of 64, which is 8. We could still simplify this because the square root of 8 is 4 times 2 is rather 2 square root of 2. Okay, this one is the same as square root of 2 root 2. So you could stop there, or you could go ahead one more step and you say this is going to be 2 times 4, then that gives 8 square root of 2 divided by 8, or this will simplify to the square root of 2. So what we did here is notice that 8 is the same as 4 times 2. The square root of 4 is 2. So 2 times 4 is 8. And so you are now remaining with the other square root of 2, which is what we have here. And so the final answer will be square root of 2. Then now in the next step, we are supposed to handle this. Now, we have a lot of questions here. Let me do the last 2 questions. As number 4 and 5, then you will find a way of handling these other ones. So to handle this one here, number 11, I will start with number 11. So what do we have? We have square root of 3. Why have I taken that? It's because these questions are many and we really don't have all the time we need to do all the questions. So we just get a few questions. We use them to illustrate for you how it's done, just a few. Then from that, you should be able to do some practice, okay? Down here, we have square root of 5. Like that. So up is square root of what? Square root of 3 minus 1. Yes, that's what we have. So to rationalize, well, it means we have to multiply by 1. In the first step, we multiply by 1, okay? But then in the step which follows, this 1 will be replaced with what? With the square root of 5 divided by the square root of 5. Normally we want to prefer the denominator when we are rationalizing. So we'll be having this and also that. So what would be the next step? Well, in the next step, denominator will be 5 because the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25, which simplifies to 5. Now this square root of 5 times square root of 3 is square root of 15. So we would like to write that as square root of 15. Okay, then now minus 1 times square root of 5 is what? Is square root of 5. Okay, now is there a way we can simplify that further? No, we cannot. Let's just leave it there. So now we move on to the last question for our attempt, which is question 12. So what do we have for question 12? Well, we have this expression here, which is square root of 5, square root of 5 minus 1, square root of 5 minus 1. Then we also have square root of 3 plus, rather square root of 5 plus 3. The denominator is square root of 5 plus what? Plus 3. We want to rationalize it. So in the first step, we multiply by 1. And in the second step, In the second step, the 1 will be replaced by the what? By the denominator. So let's first write it as a fraction like this, so that the denominator is this one here. Okay, let's just first copy the denominator and write them there. And also for this. Now notice that for this case, since there are two terms, this square root of 5 and 3, we change the sign in between the two so that we have something similar to difference of two squares, like that. Now that way, we can simplify it with a lot of ease. So what will we get in the next step? Well, in the next step, we have to multiply square root of 5 times square root of 5, which is square root of 25, which simplifies to 5. Then again, square root of 5 times 3. That will give us minus 3 times square root of 5. Minus 3 times square root of 5. Then we now have to multiply this 1 times square root of 5. That is going to be minus what? Minus square root of 5. Then now this 1 times this 3, which gives us what? Plus 3. Now denominator. Here, 5 times square root of 5 times square root of 5, you know difference of two squares. Square root of 5 times square root of 5 is square root of 25, and it simplifies to 5. That is, when we multiply this times that, will be square root minus 3 square root of, let me write this, this is going to be minus 3 square root of 5 minus 3 square root of 5. Yes, then now we are done with this times the 2, then we come to 3. So we have to multiply this 3 with this square root of 5. That will give us 3 square root of 5. Then this 3, have to got to multiply that 3 to give us what? Minus 9. Yes. Now, in the next step, which I guess should now be down here, yes. So in the next step, this was fairly long, and that's most likely what you're going to find out there when you're doing practice. So 5 plus 3 is 8. Okay, these ones don't have square root sign, so we add them first. Minus 3 minus 1 is minus 4. So we have minus 4 square root what? Square root 5. Then down here, 5, this one will cancel because this is minus, this is plus. So they will cancel. So we now have 5 minus 9. 5 minus 9 is negative 4. Like that. So yes, we just want to simplify that and we get done. Yes, we can simplify. We divide this by all that. When we do that division, what are we going to have? We are going to have, well, negative 2, because 8 divided by negative 4 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus what? This is going to be 4 divided by 4 is 1. So it's going to be square root of 5. Yes, and that is going to be the answer to our question. And yes, I will encourage you to try these other remaining questions. Okay, that is question 4 onwards, question 4 to question 10. Please go ahead and do them. That will be a very good practice for you as you will be preparing for what? For your exam. Yeah, our lesson of today stops here.